You think you're saved, but this could prove you're not. You believe you're saved. You've told yourself that more than once. You've prayed, you've trusted, you've held on to something inside you that says you're okay. And maybe no one has ever challenged that. Maybe no one ever looked at you and asked the question that's been quietly waiting beneath the surface. But what if the most dangerous place you could be is thinking you're safe when you're not? There are people who feel peace, but it's not real. People who feel close, but they've never truly surrendered. And the hardest truth to accept is this: you can believe something with all your heart and still be wrong. I'm not here to accuse you. I'm here because you deserve to know the truth, not the comfortable version, not the one that helps you sleep at night without questions. The real one, the one that reaches into the quiet parts of your life where no one else sees. Because there is a difference between knowing about God and being known by Him. And that difference is not always visible on the outside. It doesn't show up in words or routines or appearances. It reveals itself in ways most people never stop to examine. And if you've never questioned your own foundation, if you've never stopped and asked yourself why you believe what you believe, then this moment matters more than you think. Stay with me. Don't look away from this, because what you're about to see might change the way you see yourself forever. There is a kind of peace that feels real, but it was never built on truth. It feels calm, it feels stable, it feels like everything is in place. But beneath it, nothing has actually changed. And the most dangerous part is that you don't notice it. You live inside it as if it were proof that everything's fine. You tell yourself you believe, you tell yourself you're on the right path. And over time, that belief becomes a shield, not against the world, but against the truth. Because once you feel secure, you stop questioning, you stop examining, you stop looking deeper. But salvation was never meant to make you comfortable. It was meant to transform you. There are people who have built an entire identity around faith, but never allowed that faith to reach the parts of their life that needed to change. They've learned the language, the habits, the environment, but not the surrender. And because everything around them looks right, they assume everything inside must be right too. This is where deception becomes silent. Not loud, not obvious, but quiet, settled, hidden behind routine and familiarity. You wake up, you live your life, you carry your beliefs, and never stop to ask if those beliefs are actually alive within you. And maybe right now, something in you feels a little uncomfortable. Not fear, but a subtle awareness, like something isn't as solid as you thought. That feeling is not your enemy. It's the moment where truth begins to break through. Don't ignore it, because what feels like security might be the very thing keeping you from seeing what's real. There is something within you that wants to believe you are right, even when you've never truly examined it. It's quiet, almost invisible, but it shapes the way you see everything. You don't wake up thinking you're deceiving yourself. You wake up convinced that what you believe must be true, because it feels true. The mind has a way of protecting what is familiar. It holds on to ideas that bring comfort, that reduce tension, that allow you to move through life without disruption. And when something challenges that, you don't always confront it. Sometimes you push it away without even realizing it. That's how self-deception begins, not as a lie you choose, but as a truth you never questioned. You repeat the same beliefs, the same words, the same patterns until they become part of you. And over time, you stop separating what is real from what is simply repeated. You assume that because you've always believed it, it must be correct. But what if no one ever told you to look deeper? What if no one ever asked you to examine not just what you believe, but why you believe it? Because there is a difference between inherited faith and revealed truth. One is passed down, accepted, carried forward. The other is discovered, confronted, lived, and most people never make that transition. They stay in what is easy to accept. They build their confidence on something they've never tested. And because nothing immediately feels wrong, they assume everything must be right. That assumption becomes dangerous, not because it feels false, but because it feels completely normal. Right now, you might feel a tension inside you, a question you've never allowed yourself to fully face. That is not weakness, that is awareness. And awareness is where truth begins to take shape. Because if your faith has never been challenged, it may have never been real. There is one sign, so quiet, so overlooked, that most people never recognize it. It doesn't shout. It doesn't interrupt your life in obvious ways. It simply stays there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for you to notice. Nothing changes, not deeply, not internally, not in the places that truly matter. You continue living the same way, thinking the same thoughts, reacting the same way under pressure, holding on to the same patterns that have always defined you. And yet, you still tell yourself that something inside you is different. But transformation leaves evidence. It may not be perfect, it may not be immediate, but it cannot be absent. Because when something real happens within you, it begins to affect how you see, how you choose, how you respond. It reshapes your direction, even if slowly. So if nothing has shifted, if your life still follows the same path, driven by the same impulses, then you have to ask yourself a question most people avoid. What exactly changed? It's easy to point to moments. A prayer you said, a decision you made, a feeling you had. But moments are not transformation. Feelings are not proof. And words, no matter how sincere they seemed at the time, do not carry weight if they leave no mark. This is where many people get trapped. They anchor their certainty in something that happened once, instead of what is happening now. They look back and say, that was the moment. But they never look forward to see if that moment produced anything real. And deep inside, there is often a quiet knowing, not loud enough to disturb your routine, not strong enough to force change, but present, persistent, like a whisper asking, why is everything still the same? Don't silence that question, because that quiet lack of change might be the clearest sign you've never truly seen. It's possible to do everything that looks right and still remain unchanged. You can attend, participate, repeat, follow, and never truly be transformed. From the outside, it appears complete. From the inside, something is still untouched. Religion can teach you what to say. It can guide your behavior, shape your routines, surround you with structure, and over time you begin to look like someone who belongs. You fit in. You understand the language. You know when to speak, when to listen, when to agree. But transformation does something religion cannot imitate. It reaches the parts of you that no one else sees. It confronts what you hide. It challenges what you justify. It doesn't just adjust your behavior, it alters your direction. And that kind of change cannot be performed. It has to be lived. Many people confuse activity with authenticity. They measure their faith by what they do instead of what has changed within them. And as long as they remain active, they feel secure. But activity can become a distraction, a way to stay busy without ever going deeper, because going deeper is uncomfortable. It requires honesty. It requires letting go of control. It requires facing things you've learned to ignore. And most people would rather stay consistent in routine than confront what transformation demands. So they remain where they are, not because they don't care, but because they've never allowed themselves to see the difference between what looks right and what is real. And over time, that difference fades until they can no longer tell the two apart. But there is a moment when something begins to separate them again, a quiet realization that doing everything right is not the same as being changed. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. There is a point where repetition begins to replace awareness. You keep doing the same things, saying the same words, following the same rhythm, and it starts to feel natural, familiar, safe. But something slowly disappears in the process. Presence. You pray, but your mind is somewhere else. You speak, but your heart is not engaged. You follow a pattern you've repeated so many times that it no longer requires anything from you. And because it feels normal, you assume it's still meaningful. But routine can become a mask. It allows you to continue without ever confronting whether anything is actually alive within you. It gives the appearance of consistency while hiding the absence of depth. And over time, that absence becomes invisible. You don't notice when it started. You don't notice when your words became automatic, when your attention faded, when your connection turned into habit. It happens slowly, quietly, without interruption. And that's why it's so dangerous, because nothing feels wrong. Everything looks the same on the outside. You're still showing up, still doing what you've always done. And that continuity convinces you that everything is still in place. But continuity is not proof of life. Something real responds. It engages. It moves. It challenges you. It pulls you deeper, not just through repetition, but through awareness. And when that awareness is gone, what remains is empty motion. Right now, ask yourself something honestly. When was the last time you felt fully present, not just going through the motions, but aware of what you were saying, feeling, choosing, not out of obligation, but because something inside you was truly alive? If you can't remember, then something has already shifted. And what feels like faith might just be habit. There is a kind of distance that doesn't feel like distance at all. You're still there, still believing, still moving forward, still holding on to everything you've always known. And yet, something is no longer connected the way it once should have been. It's not dramatic. It doesn't break your routine. It doesn't stop your life. It simply exists quietly beneath everything else. And because it doesn't demand your attention, you learn to live with it. You continue making the same choices. You react the same way under pressure. You hold on to the same patterns, the same habits, the same internal responses that have always guided you. And at some point, you stop expecting anything different. But connection produces change, not perfection, but movement, a shift in how you think, how you respond, how you see what once felt normal. And when that movement is missing, something deeper is missing with it. This is where many people remain unaware. They assume that because nothing has collapsed, nothing is wrong. Because their life continues, because their belief still exists, because they haven't walked away, they assume they are still aligned. But alignment is not measured by presence. It's revealed through direction. And if your direction hasn't changed, if you're still being pulled by the same things, shaped by the same desires, controlled by the same impulses, then you have to ask yourself something honestly. What is actually guiding you? Because it's possible to stay close to something without ever being connected to it. And that invisible disconnection is one of the hardest things to recognize until you stop and truly look. There is an assumption many people carry without ever questioning it, that time automatically means growth. That the longer you believed, the longer you followed, the longer you've stayed, the more secure you must be. But time, by itself, proves nothing. You can spend years repeating the same patterns, years thinking the same way, years staying in the same place internally, while everything around you continues to move forward. And because so much time has passed, you assume something must have changed. But what if it hasn't? What if time has only made things more comfortable, more familiar, more settled? Not deeper, not stronger, just more accepted. And that acceptance can become dangerous because it removes the urgency to examine anything at all. You stop asking questions. You stop looking inward. You begin to rely on how long you've been there instead of what has actually happened within you during that time. And that reliance creates a false sense of progress. But real growth leaves evidence. It reshapes your priorities, it shifts your responses, it changes what you once tolerated and what you now refuse to accept. It moves you forward even when it's uncomfortable, even when it requires something from you. So if you look at your life and you see the same reactions, the same struggles, the same patterns repeating again and again, then time has not transformed you. It has only carried you. And there comes a moment when you can no longer measure your life by how long you've believed, but by what that belief has actually produced. Because staying the same for years is not stability, it's stagnation. There is a version of peace that feels right, but it was never meant to keep you where you are. It settles in quietly, removes tension, softens every edge, and before you realize it, you stop feeling the need to change anything at all. Comfort can feel like confirmation. It tells you that everything's okay, that there's nothing to question, nothing to confront, nothing to examine. And when that feeling stays long enough, you begin to trust it without resistance. But truth doesn't always feel comfortable. Sometimes it unsettles you. Sometimes it exposes things you've learned to ignore. Sometimes it disrupts the version of yourself you've grown used to. And when that happens, you have a choice: to lean into it or to retreat back into what feels safe. Most people choose safety not because they don't care, but because comfort removes urgency. It allows you to stay where you are without pressure. It gives you just enough peace to avoid going deeper, and just enough stability to never feel the need to move. But growth requires tension, It requires moments where you're forced to look at what you would rather avoid. Moments where you feel something inside you shift, not gently, but clearly. And those moments don't happen when everything feels easy. So if your life has become too comfortable, too settled, too undisturbed, then something may already be missing. Because what is real does not leave you unchanged. It challenges you. It refines you. It calls you beyond what you've accepted as enough. And if nothing has been calling you forward, then comfort may not be a sign that you're safe. It may be the reason you're not moving at all. There are parts of your life you don't like to look at directly, not because you don't know they exist, but because you've learned how to live around them. You adjust, you justify, you redirect your attention, and over time, avoidance becomes normal. You tell yourself, it's not that serious. You tell yourself, you'll deal with it later. You convince yourself that everything else you're doing somehow balances it out. And that quiet agreement you've made within yourself allows those areas to remain untouched. But what you avoid reveals more than what you show. Because real change doesn't happen where everything is visible and controlled. It happens in the places you've kept hidden, the decisions you don't talk about, the patterns you've stopped questioning, the things you've learned to tolerate within yourself. And deep down, you know where those areas are. You don't need someone to point them out. You've felt them before, in moments of silence, in moments where everything slows down, and something inside you becomes impossible to ignore. But those moments don't last long. Life moves, distractions return, and what you briefly saw gets pushed back into the background, not because it disappeared, but because you chose not to stay with it. That choice matters more than you think, because every time you avoid what needs to be faced, you reinforce the version of yourself that refuses to change. You strengthen the distance between what you believe and what you live. And eventually, that distance becomes your reality. So ask yourself something honestly. What have you been avoiding that you already know needs to change? Because until you face it, nothing else you build will be real. There comes a moment when everything you've avoided, everything you've assumed, everything you've carried without question, stands in front of you all at once, not to condemn you, but to reveal what has always been there. This is that moment, not tomorrow, not later, right now. Because truth does not wait for convenience. It doesn't adjust itself to your comfort. It doesn't soften itself to protect what you've built. It simply shows you what is real. And what is real is not what you say you believe. It's what your life is proving. Look at your direction. Look at your patterns. Look at what continues even after everything you claim to hold on to. Not the words, not the intentions, the evidence. Because evidence cannot be hidden. It shows up in how you respond when no one is watching. It shows up in what you choose when no one is guiding you. It shows up in what remains unchanged, even after time has passed. This is where the question becomes unavoidable. Not, do you believe, but has anything truly changed? And if you're honest, truly honest, you may begin to see something you've never allowed yourself to fully admit. That belief alone has not transformed you. That intention alone has not redirected you. That something essential has never actually taken root. This is not about fear. This is about clarity. Because once you see the truth, You cannot return to what you thought before. You cannot pretend not to know. You cannot go back to assumptions that no longer hold weight. And that is where everything begins to shift. You've seen it now, not something distant, not something abstract, but something personal. Something that reaches into your own life and asks you to look again. Not at what you say, not at what you feel, but at what is real. And maybe this wasn't what you expected. Maybe you thought you would feel reassured. Maybe you thought this would confirm everything you already believed. But instead, something shifted. Something inside you became harder to ignore. That matters, because awareness is where everything begins. Not comfort, not routine, not assumption. Awareness. The moment you stop and truly see, without defending yourself, without explaining it away, without running from it, that is where truth starts to take hold. And you are not being pushed away. You are being called to look deeper, to move beyond what has been easy, beyond what has been repeated, beyond what has never been questioned, not to lose anything, but to finally find what is real. Because what is real does not leave you the same. It changes how you see. It changes how you choose. It changes the direction of your life, not all at once, but in a way that cannot be undone. So don't rush past this moment. Stay with it, because the question is no longer what you believe. It's what your life is proving.